This is Evan Smith here. In my last video, I went over the Beatitudes in 10 minutes. And in today's video, I want to build upon that video by telling you my life story with this set of Jenga. So, I think you would all agree that the family is the foundation for anyone's life. It is where we learn to love, and in turn learn to love others. It's where we learn how to give, how to share, how to be productive members in our societies, where we learn how to handle money. It's where we learn how to get our first job, how to be responsible, how to be self-disciplined, and again, to be productive members in our society. But the issue is that sometimes this is disrupted by various traumas or happenings in one's life that will prevent them from learning those foundational things to help them be productive members in society and to live out their own personal potential. And this was the case in my own life. So starting from the beginning, for me, generationally in my family, there is poverty and there is abuse and a lot of other things that has impacted my family. And this is what I was born into. So that means this black section here, that, boom, I did it. So I already started out with a disadvantage, right? So growing up, I was born in Toronto, and I remember when I think I was about 6 years old, I am in school and my mom comes to pick me up and we go move into a shelter, right? That's when I learned that her and my father were breaking up and they were getting a divorce. So right away, that's another trauma for me that impacted me emotionally and impacted the rest of my life. So there's another block gone away from the foundation of my life. Oh, is it gonna fall? It fell. Back in a second. I got it built again. But actually that happening was a great example for later on. So I'll come back to it falling in a little later. But as I was saying, the fact that I was born into a family that already had generational patterns of poverty and abuse was already a disadvantage for me, because whatever was transferred to my parents will more than likely come out and be transferred to me and exhibit itself in various ways. But I can get into that later. So that's one block gone, right? So as I was saying, my mother picked me up from school, moved to a shelter for a while, parents are getting divorced. So that's another trauma for me. And the impact it had on me, let me see if we can get another block out. There we go. So the foundations are being taken away. So the impact that had on me was that I became very, very, very disruptive in school. I, believe it or not, I would on a daily basis get in fights all through elementary school. I think by the time I was in grade 7, I had about 30 suspensions, internal and outside of school as well. And I'm not exaggerating, like about 30 suspensions for sure, seriously. For fighting individuals, I remember actually in grade 1 or 2 actually kicking a kid in his face. I would swear at the teachers on a daily basis. My mom really had a warm time with me. I would throw chairs. I actually threw a desk once over my cubicle. And I remember actually choking a kid once when I was in grade 1. And in a lot of these things I didn't remember doing until I sat down one day and actually read my school file, and I saw that I was cutting myself. I would take a pencil and sort of twist it in my neck. I would do all sorts of things, and not only was I trouble at school, but I was also trouble at home. And my mom had a very, very, very warm time with me. I wouldn't listen to her. I got spanked all the while, and it was a very difficult time for me in my life. So if this right here is the foundation of my life and family and so forth. This part and up represents the rest of my life, right? So as I mentioned before, my impact in school. So because their foundation was hurt, up here is hurt as well. And school was a place where I wasn't successful at all until much later on in my school career. So I was placed in a behavior class. So there's about 7 kids in the class. I couldn't, work in a regular classroom. So I was in that special class, I think from about grade 3 all the way to high school. So, and during that time, I experienced all sorts of, anger. I was depressed as a small child. My mom would bring me to see psychiatrists and psychologists. I would have tantrums so bad that I was brought to the hospital. And it wasn't until this age now where I'm learning about people being formed, right, where there is people are having psychotic breaks or behaviors that can't be controlled when they're a potential danger to themselves or society, and the police or ambulance will bring that person to the hospital. So I'm a young kid in elementary school being formed. I'm brought to the hospitals for the doctors to look at and until I was calmed down and able to leave the hospital. I tried to run away from home 3 times. So once I got up really early in the morning and I walked out. I think I was in grade 2, right? So what is that, 7, 8 years old? This is before my parents got divorced, and but there's a lot of fighting happening, right? And it's very disruptive for me. So I tried to run away. Then I chickened out, came back home. The next time, it was after the divorce. I'd actually, instead of walking to school, decided to walk to the local mall. That was really far for me. I walked with my toys. I tried to sell them so I could make some money and, go on a bus to go somewhere. I don't know where. Police ended up finding me, bringing me home. I actually met a nice lady who bought me lunch that day as well. They tried to help me out. And then the last time I was just in school, I was like, you know what, forget this. I just don't want to be here. Again, walked away off school property. Police eventually found me, and I was brought back home. So, needless to say, I experienced a lot in my life, and my behavior sort of showed how it impacted me. Oh, and I can't forget the fact that I was also sexually abused myself. So that really hit me when I was 16, and I just became depressed, even more so suicidal. Yeah, and I also remember cutting myself. I never actually tried to commit suicide, but I would meditate on that thought a lot, and I would cry myself to sleep, wake up from nightmares all the time. So the impact was dire. So imagine now, again, this represents my life. So the foundation, to take it away. My dad wasn't there for me the way I needed him to be as well, right? So foundations are being taken away. So if you play for Jenga enough, you'll know that the more you take away from the foundation, the more unbalanced it gets, right? So that means it's vulnerable to falling down. I remember playing Jenga with my son the other day, and I'm like, nobody walk around the Jenga game because the vibrations of people walking around can actually knock it down. So it's very shaky, very vulnerable to falling out. So the foundation has been taken away. It's not strong. So I have the rest of my life, right? Remember, my school career wasn't that good either, up to that point. And I have the rest of my life to live. It's top heavy. The foundation's not strong. Anything can happen and not knock it down even further, right? So we start from here. family is broken, I'm not learning the things I need to learn around self-discipline, around love, around loving myself, loving others, being a productive member of society. Therefore, I cannot be successful in school, right? So if I'm not successful in school, how am I going to get a job? How am I going to provide for my family? How am I going to do the other things that are necessary for me to be a productive member of society? I remember one day I'm going to have kids, right? And the pattern continues. So remember, I'm coming from a family history of poverty, of abuse, and it's already happening again, right? So it didn't happen to me though, right? I mean, it could have been that if I didn't get help, I would have ended up in a very bad place, right? And in my work, I used to work for a program where I helped young men and women in conflict with the law find employment. And the pattern I found with almost almost all of them, was that they come from a broken home, right? So either a single father or single mother in the home, where there's a lot of disruption, very little parenting, right? And then almost all of them, again, right, what wouldn't have made it past grade 10, right? So then they're coming to me when they're 18, early 20s, trying to put their life together, but don't have the solid foundation to do it. So they'll have difficulties keeping a job, difficulties with their attitude, being rude to people, not being able to manage their anger, and all these other life skills a lot of people take for granted, they don't have because their foundation has been taken away. That could have been my future, except the fact that I had people who were living out the Beatitudes, who helped me, right? All power to my mother. She never stopped praying. She never stopped loving me. She never stopped trying to help me and encourage me, no matter how much I disrespected her, no matter how much I made her cry. And I remember her crying a lot because of me. So she just exhibited that mercy, right? So remember that beatitude, mercy. It's a giving of oneself sacrificially, And my mom gave herself sacrificially to me all through my life, from the beginning to now. She continues to give, and because of that, I was able to love myself, and not only because of her, but because of other people in my life as well. I remember there was a teacher named Mrs. Teskey, and she would always, I remember her because whenever I walk into class, she'd always tell me how much of a great kid I am, no matter how much trouble I caused. And she held me accountable for when I caused trouble, but in the end, she always told me how much of a great kid I was, how much and how much of a great man I was going to be. She told me that. I remember that. I was probably, again, 6 or 7 and remembering this. I remember another teacher, Mrs. Zigman. She was a very hard woman, you know what I mean? She was very strict, but fair, And I don't remember her encouraging me much. And I know she probably did, but what I do remember from her is that she provided order in my life and security. I always knew what to expect from her. I always knew that if I didn't follow the rules, that there was going to be a consequence, and that when I did something well, there'll be something good to follow from her as well. But I remember her and receiving. I remember receiving that as love as well. So again, her being patient with me, and remember that at this time in my life, right, I was swearing at teachers, throwing desks, throwing chairs, fighting every day, and this teacher had the patience to work with me, right? She was kind, right? So we talk about meekness, right? Which is also kindness. So it was incredible what she did for me. But it wasn't until later in life I was a teenager where my youth pastor at the time was a real blessing to me. You know, I was growing up, and I was actually began to try in school. I matured. But my behavior exhibited itself in different ways. So no longer was I lashing out, but all that lashing out became pointed internally for me. So I became depressed, right? I didn't know it at the time, but became very depressed and suicidal for a long time. So eventually I got sick of the pattern. You know, I tried the alcohol, I tried the sex, I tried smoking weed and all these things to sort of pacify that pain that I was going through. But, eventually I tried Christ. You know, I got baptized, became a part of a church community, and that youth pastor was very instrumental in my life. His name is Pastor Edwards. He, shortly after joining his church, he very quickly saw the potential in me. He had like just full faith in who I was and who I was going to be. And it was so instrumental because I didn't have faith in who I was and who I was going to be. You know, I was so insecure and so broken and so desirous of a male leadership and mentorship, and he filled that void for me, you know. So I remember him, you know, one thing he did for me was actually he paid for me to go to Egypt, right? So it was a few $1,000s, but it was an incredible experience. But he sacrificed that for me. You know, he did that for me. He would invite me to his home. I spent time with his family. He did this for a lot of kids, youth in the church at the time. Would swim in his pool. You know, he would take us out for dinner and do all these things. But the key thing was that he just put me in positions to use my gifts. He helped me discover my gifts and discover who I was. You know, and I remember the day he asked me to be the youth leader in the church. I was like, what? What are you talking about? You know, and I remember another day he asked me to organize this community fair, you know, and I couldn't believe that he was asking me to do that. You know, I'd only been in church for maybe a year or two. I didn't feel like I was anybody. I didn't feel like I was anything special. But that faith in me, he put, really helped me to begin to believe in myself, right? So, you know, when we talk about mercy, you know, and that sacrificial giving, he really exemplified that, right? And for him, you know, I know it was the other Beatitudes that led to it that really allowed him to do that, because, you know, the first Beatitude is blessed are the poor in spirit, right? That understanding that you are nothing without God, you know. And then, you know, blessed are those who mourn, right? So because you understand you're nothing without God, and you begin to see how much you are in need of him, you mourn the fact that you've sinned. You know, you mourn the fact that you've fallen so short, so it hurts, you know what I mean? But God will comfort you, you know. And then because you understand how your position in God now, and how much you're in need of him, and not only yourself, how much others now are in need of him, because if you can see yourself through the correct eyes, you can see others as well, and how much they need God as well, right? So then you're able to respond appropriately with meekness and kindness, and that's what he showed me, right? And now because he understands what it is for himself to fall short and able to show that to somebody else, he's able now to then fight for me as well, right? So he said, blessed, the Bible, then it goes on to, says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. So not only did he show me kindness, he thirsted for a righteousness, not only for himself, but a righteousness and a justice for those who have been hurt. He could see my suffering and wanted to see me be healed. This is what he did, you know, and it was consistent with that. And so, and it's the same thing for the other teachers that I've described, right? I don't know if they're a Christian or not, but it's that understanding of self, and how we are all one, and how we are all in need of the same type of love that drives one to be able to show love and kindness to others. And this is what Pastor Edwards did for me, right? And not only that, right? He did it consistently, right? So, and so the next beatitude is blessed are the pure in heart, right? So pure in heart, for me means that your mind and your heart is single, right? Your only desire, your only focus is Christ. So therefore, you're able to remain consistent. And Pastor Edwards to this day is consistent with his belief in who I am and what I'm going to become. And him, my mother, my teachers are all instrumental in me understanding who I am and who I will be. There's one more individual in my early 20s. His name is Minister Winston from Philadelphia. He was, oh my goodness, he's such an incredible blessing to my life. And actually, I met him on my trip to Egypt that Pastor Edwards paid for. And right away, when I met him, I think after I went to visit him for the first time in Philadelphia, I was already calling him my godfather. Never have I met a man just so open to receiving people into his life, and looking after him. I don't think he had any biological sons, but he had many sons, and he actually paid for my ticket to go to Philadelphia to stay with him for a while. Do you believe that? I was speaking to him on the phone. I was crying. I was depressed. I just couldn't take life anymore, And he said, come, son, to Philadelphia and stay with me for a while, And I did, And this is by no means a rich man. It's not like he had money, oodles of money coming out of his ears or anything like that. He just saw my pain, saw what I was going through. Again, based on all the other Beatitudes, he recognized, the need for me to have that love and have that mentorship. He recognized it so much so that he was willing to sacrifice his own time and his money to bring someone he doesn't know very well into his home from another country, right? I had only spent 10 days with him before that time. I spoke to him on the phone, right? 10 days. And he brought me into his home to sleep over and be there, And it was such a blessing, I remember us praying together, go to church together. I'd even go to work with him, we just talk, chill out, and it was such a blessing. And even while I was there, he took another kid in. You know what I mean? So there was another young man who stayed with us for a while. And while I was there too, we would drive around and like there'd be other young men calling him. It's like, hey, what's going on, dad? Da 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 da. They need help. So we went to go help that person and so forth and so on. But the fact that they showed me that love really helped me, right? So back to Jenga now. If the foundational things of family are missing, right? If that consistency in love, that consistency in community, and that consistency in security in understanding who I am, what I put on this earth to do, knowing that I could accomplish much, how to handle money, how to handle business, how to be successful in school, how to be successful in life, how to be a good person, all that stuff that are foundational to any good life. You're supposed to learn in family. The way you repair that, right, if mom and dad can't do it for whatever reason, is community. It's people like Mrs. Teskey, Miss Zigman, Pastor Edwards, and Minister Winston, and especially my mom being consistent and replacing the things that were supposed to be there in the first place, right? So Miss Teskey consistently showed me love and, let me see if we get this in there, remembered and reminded me always of who I was, right? My mom always praying, always loving me, always looking after me. Again, help repair that foundation. Pastor Edwards incredible man who, again, helped me in a very dire time, you know? And then Minister Winston, of course, he was a blessing too in my life and established that foundation. Now, the foundation's strong. I can shake it and it'll stay. I remember in the beginning of this video when this toppled over when I tried to take out a piece, that's because I was vulnerable, right? Because I didn't have that strong foundation, the rest of it couldn't stand, right? So eventually I was able to be successful in school. I was actually the first person in my immediate family, besides my mother, to graduate from post-secondary education, right? And now I have beautiful, wonderful kids, married to an incredible wife, have a great job, and people say I'm a great man too. But I was only able to come to this place because someone lived out the Beatitudes. What it took to get me here was sacrifice, humility, mercy, meekness, a hunger, and a thirst to help me. Because these people could have easily walked by and looked over me. They could have easily ignored me in school and pushed me through my grades and said, forget this kid, he's too much trouble. But because there was a hunger and a thirst, a deep desire to see justice, to see healing and mercy, they chose to help me. I'm almost in tears right now. Because, yeah, without them, I wouldn't, sorry, I wouldn't be the man I am today. I believe you me, the pain was real, you know, it was deep. And I've even gone through traumas before then, after that, you know, I'm divorced. I'm on, I'm married to my second wife. She's wonderful, but, I wouldn't be able to survive that, unless these people help me, I was able to take the blows that life has given me. I survived the blows that life is giving me now because these people chose to love me and they continue to love me. This is what the Beatitudes are all about. We can save people's lives by just living out these things. These people did very simple things, and so that I can do great things and help others. In my work, I help hundreds, if not thousands of people who are in crisis. The people around me, I do my best to be a blessing to them. And I'm able to raise my children and teach them the lessons that I've learned and love them the way I've been loved so that I can break these generational curses from out of my life and out of theirs. And it stops with me, right? So again, live out the Beatitudes. This is how it plays out in our daily lives. There are so many people in need and who need people like Miss Teskey, Mrs. Zigman, Pastor Edwards, Minister Winston, and my mom to help them and to help them succeed and live out their full potential. I want to thank you for taking this time to listen to me. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this video, and check out my other videos from before. In my next video, I'll give some more examples of how necessary living out the Beatitudes is to healing our society as a whole. Thank you so much and have an awesome day.